Welcome to Heidi Relationships. Today, we'll read some more stories from Reddit. But before we start, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. That would help the channel a lot. Thank you very much in advance.
The first one is titled, "Be Careful What You Wish for 36LL is having the sexual awakening I've always wanted, and it might end our marriage. My wife and I are 36HLM and 36LLF and have been married for 15 years. We were high school sweethearts and neither of us have ever slept with anyone else. We grew up conservative evangelicals and she was the first girl I did anything with. She had one other boyfriend before me who she fooled around with, but never slept with. We were 21 when we married. Most of the time we were dating and engaged. We were in a long-distance relationship. Our physical chemistry during this time was intense on both sides. Her libido was through the roof, and she constantly wanted to do sexual stuff with me, probably a little more than I was ready for, thanks Christianity. Needless to say, I was really looking forward to getting married and having the craziest sexual ride of my life. Yeah, you know how this story goes. On our honeymoon, we had a lot of sex that was okay, but never amazing. Which is fine, we had no idea what we were doing. But then we had an incredibly brutal first year of marriage. Living overseas with a culture and language barrier, struggling financially, she couldn't work legally, we were spending tons of time together for the first time ever, since it was mostly long distance before that, no family or other support system around, etc. Horrible, horrible time. I've never cried like I did a few times that first year. The feeling of helplessness and rejection was overwhelming. We still managed to have sex every couple week or so, but it wasn't good. Our second year we moved back to the USA and started another tough time. I was taking a double full-time load of college classes to finish as quickly as possible and she was working overnights, so we rarely saw each other. Sex continued to be an issue and we had no idea where to turn or what was even wrong. Then about 18 months into our marriage, I stumbled on text messages she had exchanged with two different work colleagues. This was almost 14 years ago and to this day, it turns my stomach. Stuff like her being so disappointed that he wasn't going to be at work for a few days, or her debating whether she should go hang out at his apartment in a nearby city because she didn't think she could behave herself, etc. She was sleeping when I found this, and I woke her up and confronted her. She broke down and confessed everything. She said they literally had done nothing physical other than extended hugs and over time I've come to believe her. But I felt so betrayed to see her expose her flirty and sexual side to two other people when we didn't have that. The next day I called a therapist and we spent 6 months putting our relationship back together. It really made a difference and we moved away from that town to a new amazing city to start a new life. Things have never been anywhere nearly as bad as those first 2 years. But they've never been amazing either. In the 5 years after that, I really struggled with trying to push our sexual relationship forward, but I eventually gave up and stopped pushing it. It's been pretty static for the last 12 years or so. Don't get me wrong, our sex life is good, but vanilla and pretty routine. Weekly scheduled frequency or a little less, we use toys, she orgasms, we do multiple positions, etc. Little to no oral, because she doesn't really like to give or receive. It's solid but not amazing. I have higher libido but not by miles or anything. My biggest problem is that she's just never been super interested in sex. Never initiated, never wanted to do anything beyond PIV, though always up for different positions, pretty awkward about parts of it, but the sex itself was usually pretty decent once we got into it. I stopped initiating years ago because it was just too painful, and I felt so rejected and unloved, so we just switched to scheduled sex. Which honestly was okay, and I felt like I had made peace with all this. But then a year ago, I made a comment about her wearing sundresses for me since I find them sexy. To which she got super upset and offended. I told her that I wasn't going to spend my life in a relationship with someone who got upset that I saw them as a sexual being and that we needed to work on this. She agreed and said she'd get counseling and we did a few other things like adjusting our schedule. Then, for reasons I don't fully understand, I completely forgot all about this. More on this later. A month ago, I would have said our relationship is fairly solid. Good communication and trust, we're well suited for each other, we share similar goals and outlooks, etc. We have a young child and live in a great city. We're both educated, have great careers, upper middle class, reasonably fit and attractive, although she puts more work into that for herself than I do, much to my chagrin. Things are good. A few weeks ago, I got home from a trip, and she told me she wanted to talk. Apparently at a work conference recently, she felt really sexually attracted to a guy. Let's call him AP. They discussed the tension, and he felt the same way. He's also married, but apparently indicated that his relationship was open to some degree, whatever that means. She told him her marriage was not open and they both agreed that nothing should happen. He did kiss her neck during a hug, which I immediately told her was a violation of boundaries and not cool. She agreed and apologized. But then she told me this encounter has made her realize that our relationship is missing some kind of spark, or spontaneity, and she would like to explore being monogamish. She feels like she missed out on sleeping with other people and exploring that aspect of her sexuality, and that she is actually more sexual than she ever realized. So, she wanted to discuss an arrangement where we can play, explore with other people, a few times a year, while traveling for work according to whatever guidelines or boundaries we agree on. She's no longer satisfied with the status quo. I'll spare you all my emotional reactions and our discussions over the ensuing weeks, but suffice to say, I've been more conflicted and emotionally wrecked by this than probably anything else in my life. Initially I was very interested. I've never slept with anyone else either and I've always mourned the fact that I missed out on that. But after a few days of soul-searching and reading my journal entries for the last few years, I told her I couldn't do it. I didn't feel loved or secure enough in the relationship to watch her go through those things with someone else. She was disappointed but understood, but she also felt like she couldn't continue with the status quo. But it also became clear to me that she was intensely attracted to this guy and had really wanted to pursue this. Nevertheless, she told him she's decided not to pursue anything, and he agreed. They've had no contact since then to my knowledge. But the more I thought about all this and talked to her about it, the more I realized a hard truth that both of us have been avoiding for the last 15 years. She's not all that sexually attracted to me and really hasn't been for our entire marriage. She isn't repulsed by me either, which is why we don't have a DB. But she seems to think she should feel something more than she does, and I've felt that way myself. Needless to say, this is brutally difficult to deal with in the cold light of day and when laid next to her, butterflies in the stomach, feeling for AP. If it wasn't for the overall strength of our relationship, a decent sex life, and our daughter, I'd definitely have just bailed and tried to spare myself the pain and indignity of being married to someone who is okay with ducking me, but really wants to duck someone else. But it gets even more complicated. Tons of more talking over the past couple weeks has revealed something totally surprising. My wife is actually going through some kind of sexual awakening and has been for a year now. And I completely missed it. Like, completely. When I told her a year ago that I needed to be in a relationship with someone who recognized herself as a sexual person, she took it to heart. And then she got a therapist and went to see her for months. She read a ton of stuff about sexuality and how the purity culture of the evangelical church distorts healthy sexual attitudes. She bugged me to go to a marriage retreat that her therapist recommended, which I totally blew off. WTF. She started wanting to cuddle and be more physically affectionate, which I also blew off. She started following ethical adult videos and other adult accounts on social media. She asked if we could start watching adult videos together. Until she brought that up, I thought she hated the very idea of adult videos and would have been devastated if she knew I watched it. It totally blew my mind. All of these things took place over approximately 9 months, and I still didn't put the pieces together that something was changing for her. Even when she told me about this guy she was feeling things for and about wanting to be monogamish, I didn't realize at first that this was part of something bigger. I just felt rejection. Only after reflecting and talking with her a lot did I realize that I missed a truckload of signs that she was changing. Maybe I ignored them to avoid getting my hopes up. We worked on this a lot in the early years of marriage with basically no change, which led me to basically give up, make peace, on her ever-changing. But now for the last month since she brought up the monogamish thing and I shot it down, things have been different between us. She's buying sexy clothes for me, including sundresses, and is super into it. We did Mojo upgrade and she had a lot more stuff on her list than I would have ever expected. We're going to a strip club next week. We've been having more sex and better sex. She said she's been feeling just more sexually aware and open. She's been flirting with people, or just being aware of feeling attraction or excitement when she catches someone's eye, etc., which doesn't bother me, by the way. She said for the first time in her life, she feels like a sexual being. However, she still doesn't feel like she feels attracted to me, which hurts, but I'm not sure what that actually means. I think she's confusing this infatuation, crush feeling that she had for this guy with what she expects to feel for me. If you're completely unattracted to someone, do you get really aroused with them during sex and have loud orgasms? And by definition, you can't have new relationship energy with someone you've been married to for almost half your life. She also said she's still really bummed that she can't do anything with AP and that she can't ever sleep with other people. I think she's still fully in crush mode and is craving those feelings. So, in the end, I'm kind of getting what I always hoped for. My wife is having a sexual awakening and wants to fully explore her sexual side, including with me. Unfortunately, I'm realizing that it's not going to happen on my terms. Maybe it won't last. Maybe she'll want to do things with me that I'm not comfortable with. Most frighteningly, maybe she'll continue to feel sexually bored by monogamy and eventually insist we open the marriage, or she leaves. Or she'll cheat. I just don't know. Is she changing to be more sex positive, and I can regain her attraction? Or do I already have it but she's just confusing it with new relationship energy, and that's unrealistic? Or am I lying to myself about the last year and what's actually happened is that she's having a massive dose of sexual chemistry towards AP and I'm just getting some spillover? We have a therapist appointment next week to start to untangle all this, but I just wanted to share it here so I can update you all as things go along. We never had a DB, but we definitely had a big mismatch in how each of us saw and valued sex in our relationship. And I think that's changing, but I don't know why, whether it will last, or if it'll eventually spell the end of this marriage. Stay tuned. The next one is titled, Update Number 1. Long, 36 LLF asked me for open marriage so she could explore her sexual side with someone else. Update. April was definitely the darkest month of my life. During the first couple weeks, I did what I always do and got clingy and anxious and asked for reassurances from her. I didn't get them. To her credit, she refused to buckle and tell me what I wanted to hear. And that left me with an uncomfortable truth that I'd been avoiding facing for 15 years. My wife is not really sexually attracted to me. She's not repulsed by me either, which I think is why we don't have a dead bedroom, but I don't really get her motor running. Now, it's actually a bit more complicated than that, but that's the main issue I think. Here's what I've learned. Since day one, I've asked my wife to carry an impossible burden. To use her body to validate me as a husband and as a man. I've asked her to soothe me with sex, to reassure me when I get reactive, etc. But I'm a bottomless pit of need, and it was never enough. Being needy and clingy is incredibly unattractive. I need to learn to take care of myself, to validate myself, to accept myself. I need to believe that her being unattracted doesn't mean I'm unattractive, that her not loving me doesn't mean I'm unlovable, that her leaving doesn't mean I'm worth leaving. Growing up in the purity culture of the church and getting married young as virgins and living overseas by ourselves. Military, for our first year was all a disaster, especially for her. She went from college and friends and control over her life to living overseas with a horny, needy moron who was constantly pressuring her for sex and being passive-aggressive when he didn't get it. And I was probably terrible at it too. No wonder her desire evaporated overnight. My wife wants to want me, but that's not how it works. It's not her fault. It's just her mind and body responding the way they evolved. I can't fault her for her feelings, or lack thereof. This helped me let go of my anger. The duty, obligation sex she's provided for the last 15 years was good for me, but not great. But it was doing damage to her psyche that I didn't realize. She basically just shut down her sexual side because dealing with it was too anxiety-inducing and overwhelming. So, okay, let's do our weekly 30 minutes of minimum foreplay and eyes closed missionary position and move on. It wasn't quite that bad most of the time, but she wasn't into it. It's a miracle that we have a sex life at all. My needs are important. I gave up on having the sexual relationship of my dreams many years ago and settled for unenthusiastic duty sex. This was wrong of me and has deeply damaged us both. I will not do this again. That said, I'm not entitled to anything from her. Nothing. She doesn't owe me love, companionship, intimacy, or sex. I want those things, but that doesn't entitle me to them from her. If I have needs that aren't being met, it's up to me to make them a priority and to clearly communicate them to her. If they're still not being met, I can either STFU about it or I can walk away. But I literally never considered leaving her over this until now. After all, we both made wedding vows, and this is what I need to feel loved, so put out, damn it. Yeah, doesn't work like that. I can't control or fix or change anything other than myself. Not her, not this marriage, etc. And if I take actions with the sole purpose of trying to change her mind or get my needs met, that's a covert contract that is just going to end badly. I need to be assertive about my needs and my boundaries and be willing to walk away if they aren't met. I make a very good income, and when I was thinking about how betrayed I felt by this whole thing, the thing I kept coming back to was how I'm a great husband because I take good care of her and our kid. I'm kind and compassionate, and I'm financially successful. But come on, those are table stakes, not panty droppers. I'm not a total butthole and I can pull my weight financially. She needs more than that to be turned on, and I don't blame her. I've lost touch with my masculinity. I've never been super comfortable with traditional views of masculinity. I still think a lot of it is toxic, but I've come to see that we all have a masculine side and a feminine side, and I've just let my masculine side go. Challenging myself, being ambitious, taking risks, developing confidence, competitiveness, leadership, etc. Please note, I'm not saying women can't have these traits. My wife has all of them. But there's something to the idea of polarity driving attraction in heterosexual relationships, and somehow we've trended towards being a lesbian couple smiley face. We don't have the egalitarian relationship that I thought we did. I was never super comfortable with the idea of being the leader of our family, and when we got married and she realized I was a lazy, selfish, dumbass, she became more of a feminist pretty quickly, which was fine with me. I didn't want the responsibility of making all the decisions and being responsible for everything. But we didn't really split things up. I just let her take on everything. Seriously, I run the money in our relationship, and that's it. She manages our social life, our calendar, everything to do with our daughter, the household, etc. To be clear, I do my share of the actual work in those areas, but she's responsible for the emotional labor of managing it. This seems so obvious in hindsight, but I just never saw it. Facepalm. Overall, I'm not a great partner. I want intimacy, but mainly because of my validation needs. I'm not a good listener. I don't really do kind things for her with no expectation of getting something in return. Covert contract. I'm not particularly interested in various aspects of her life, etc. Over the years I just started taking her for granted and giving her the leftovers of my time, energy, and attention. And she's pretty bad at expressing her needs, so I never really knew it was a problem, but it's a problem for me. That's not the kind of person I aspire to be. Okay, let's talk about what I'm doing now that I've learned all this. Action. Improve my physical attractiveness. The very night that she told me about this attraction thing and suggested opening the relationship, I started thinking about my own prospects if I went out and started dating. And my first thought was, duck, I need to get my crap together. There's a ton of stuff that I've been meaning to get around to for years to make myself more attractive, and I just never bothered. Working out, Especially lifting, eating clean, dressing better, better haircuts, braces, fixing my acne scars, etc. And then it hit me. If I suddenly felt the need to be as attractive as possible to hook up with random strangers, why the duck hadn't I been doing it for my wife for 15 years? I basically have just been coasting with my dad bod and jeans and t-shirts for years. I blame some of this on how I grew up. My parents and siblings all have terrible senses of style and could care less about physical attractiveness, as far as I can tell. That was considered shallow and superficial. And maybe it is to some degree, but genitals seem to feel differently. And the reverse definitely isn't true. My wife is hot. She's been doing CrossFit for years, has a solid and unique sense of style, carries herself well, etc. She wasn't doing that stuff for me, but I benefited. So, I stepped back and asked myself, if I were an attractive woman, would I want to duck me? And the answer is, no, not really. I mean, yeah, maybe if I was drunk or bored, but I wouldn't be overcome with lust. So basically, immediately after D-Day, I started lifting and eating clean. After the first month, I switched to CrossFit, which I'm loving. I don't think I've missed a single scheduled workout since D-Day, which is a first for me. I've also been doing yoga 2 to 3 per week, which has been awesome for my body and my mind. I've cried through a few classes actually, which has been cleansing. It's now 6 weeks later and I already feel and look better. I've dropped 11 pounds on the scale, and I've added some muscle definition. I'll have visible abs in a couple months. The anxiety wrecked my appetite in April, so that was actually really helpful for kickstarting the weight loss. I also got microneedling for my acne scars, bought some new clothes, started doing a full skincare, hygiene routine. I'm getting braces in a few days, and I'm seeing a proper stylist next week about a new haircut. Action. Get a life, facing my fears. In addition to working out and doing yoga, I'm working on adding some new hobbies and social activities into my life. I found a No More Mr. Nice Guy group that I've attended once and plan to keep attending. I've started reaching out to the guy friends I do have to set up things to do. I went to a meditation temple service to learn more about Buddhism. I'm going to get my motorcycle license, something I've wanted to do for years. I'm found a nearby martial arts studio I'm going to start training at. I'm found a casual ultimate frisbee group to start playing with every week. I'm planning a solo getaway, Vision Quest, to think about what I want for my life. I'm self-employed and I'm ditching my solo office for a co-working space to be around people more. I made a huge list of ways to earn my own respect. Going to take an improv class and a dance class to start with, both of which kind of terrify me. Some of that stuff won't stick, but that's okay. The point is that I need to start prioritizing my own time and enjoyment and develop a few social hobbies so I can have a thriving social life of my own. Action. Sex, relationship. Oddly enough, our sex life is the best it's ever been. I think mainly because we're just being so honest with ourselves and with each other. She's been working on exploring, reawakening her sexual side and trying to get over the religious sexual shame bullcrap of her childhood. We've watched adult videos together, she's read erotica, we've added some dirty talk, been a little rougher in the bedroom, had sex in other rooms of the house, got some new toys, went to a strip club, etc. I know her heart isn't fully in it yet and she feels anxious and weird about some of it, religious sexual shame plus lack of attraction, but I haven't pushed for any of this, she's pushing herself. I've been initiating when I'm in the mood and it works schedule-wise, usually a few times a week. This is actually really hard for me, since I haven't initiated clearly and assertively for years and I'm rusty and awkward and afraid of pressuring her. But I've made it clear I don't want duty sex and if she's not up for it, she should just say no. She's been more receptive, but if she's not, I cheerfully move on. It's no big deal, I will not push anymore, only pull. We've made a point of carving out more time out of our schedule to just spend time together, to talk, and to have sex. It feels healthy, but I'm not about to get complacent. It took us 15 years to get here, and I'd expect at least a year or two of hard work to dig out, if we can at all. But even if we can, This vehicle doesn't have autopilot and we'll always have to be working on ourselves and keeping space open for our relationship. Action. Taking ownership of family crap. What started me thinking about this was the idea that if I was divorced and sharing custody, I should probably know what size clothes my daughter wears, or how to get in touch with the housekeeper, or what the plan is for Christmas gifts for family, or what we're having for dinner this week so I know what groceries to get, or what we're doing with friends over Memorial Day weekend, or who my daughter's pediatrician is, or how to contact our current list of babysitters, etc. So as of now, I'm going to start gradually taking over all that crap. I made a huge list of things like that my wife has just owned by default since day one, and I'm going to start just being proactive about them. I walked through our house and made a list of all the things that need to be fixed, organized, replaced, or trashed, and I'm working through it. I'm sure we'll end up somewhere in the middle where she's responsible for some of those things, but the balance has been so lopsided for so long that I'm going to be overly aggressive with just handling crap for now. Action. STFU. Don't be needy, clingy, and insecure. I'm really trying to not be needy or clingy, even though this is the part of my life when I want to do that the most. I'm really trying to stop mapping her mind. I'm trying to stop monitoring her to gauge her mood. I've stopped asking what she's thinking or feeling. I don't ask how we're doing or for commitments. I don't snoop or check her phone or ask what she's reading or what she thinks about it. If she's going to leave or cheat, she's going to leave or cheat. I have been physically affectionate when I felt like it, but just in passing and briefly. I'll touch her back when I walk past or give her a hug and kiss when I get home. I don't want to be angry and brooding, but I'm expecting nothing in return. If I feel like I really need it, I don't do it. I'm really trying to focus on the things I would do for myself if we split up, and just do them now. Which brings us to the biggest covert contract of all. If I become a better person, she'll change how she feels. But I know that's probably unlikely, which brings me to action. Develop outcome independence, break the onitis. When this all started, the mere possibility of divorce just felt like death. I couldn't even fathom it. I was physically ill thinking about our family being torn apart. She's the only lover I've ever had, and I guess I thought we were special, unique, unbreakable. I thought that our vows meant that we had unconditional love and we'd work through anything. The possibility of divorce shattered all of that. After a few weeks of freaking out, one of the most helpful things I did was actually start to think about my life after her. I did the calculation on alimony and child support. I looked at my budget after that, and the lifestyle I'd be able to afford. I thought about how it'd be kind of nice to be child-free half the time, very mixed blessing, I know, and how it'd be fun to sleep around a bit, to take fun solo vacations, to get a dog, to reimagine my life in ways I never had. And the reality is that if I do get divorced after all this, I'll be an attractive, high-income, single man in my late 30s in a major global city. How bad could that be? So, I'm not at peace with it, but I'm getting there. Honestly, the thing that still tears me up is the idea of her sleeping around and having the time of her life and thinking that she was so right to leave her marriage, that we were just incompatible or I'm a terrible lover, etc. I've seen those comments on this sub, and reading R, adultery is gutting. But that's just the covert contract and my need for validation in reverse. Last week, I had this epiphany. I was in the shower, and I was thinking about how I want a LTR who will sometimes just jump into the shower with me and go nuts. Or have sex twice in one night, or 2 days in a row. Or just be super turned on and into it. I've never had that. But I will have that. I'm not going to leave this marriage this year or next year or the year after that, if we're working on it and making progress. She might, but I'm going to keep working on it while she is. For a while. But my 40s and beyond are going to be sexually fulfilling, one way or another. Either we build a sex life that we're both excited about, and we move on. I'm no longer willing to put my needs on the back burner like I have for 15 years, and I'm no longer willing to tolerate a wife who sexually tolerates me. We both deserve better than that. Ironically, my wife's example has inspired me. Smiley face. Action. Therapy. We are incredibly fortunate to be in a position to do a private intensive with Dr. David Schnurch, author of Passionate Marriage, next month. It'll be 4 days of intense personal therapy with him, and I'm hopeful that it'll help shed some light on our situation and give us tools to move forward. We're also starting therapy with an AASECT certified sex therapist this week to hopefully start to get over our awkward fumblings around sex. Finally, we're both seeing individual therapists on our own. I'm not sure what she's addressing with hers, and I don't ask, but I'm working with mine on self-esteem and self-validation. And just having a safe space to talk through this stuff. Conclusion. The most important thing is the stuff I'm doing for myself. Which is taking responsibility for my attractiveness, stepping up and taking ownership of every area of our family life that I've neglected for 15 years, building a social life of my own, exploring my spiritual side, facing my fears and inadequacies head on, and figuring out what my mission and purpose is in life beyond just having a safe, comfortable life with my happy wife. Basically, I'm not trying to rebuild a marriage, I'm rebuilding a man. If she wants to come along for the ride and she's willing to put the same level of work into herself, awesome. I'd love to have her. But either way, this train is leaving the station. My first marriage is dead. There's a slim chance I can build a new one with this same person, but either way, I'm going to have an amazing life going forward, one way or another. This is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed the relationship stories. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video and write a comment. I really appreciate your support and it helps my channel so much. Thank you.